All right, welcome back to the channel. Keith, one-time Thurman, out in these streets telling stories that I do not believe that he believes that other people will believe. He claims that Errol Spence Jr. never asked for a fight with him, and he never ducked Errol Spence Jr. What a load of malarkey. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back. So, Keith one-time Thurman, former WBC champion, former WBA champion, one of the better, at a point in time, the #1 welterweight in the world, and that was during the time that another unified champion, Errol Spence Jr., the current WBC champion and the current IBF champion, was on his way up in the welterweight division. During that time, I recall vividly Errol Spence Jr. being on a hunt to fight Keith one-time Thurman, who held the WBA belt. The first time that I heard it, he held the WBA belt. He eventually got his hands on the WBC belt, and Errol Spence Jr. was still calling him out, wanting to make the fight. Keith Thurman was on Fox show after Showtime. It was show after show, whether it was Showtime or whether it was Fox, at fights with Errol Spence Jr., on panels with Errol Spence Jr., with the two of them, and Errol Spence Jr. looking at him in his face and saying that he wants to fight Keith Thurman on television in front of the country. Everybody heard it. But somehow Keith Thurman says that Errol Spence Jr. never asked to fight him. So how can this be? Sean Porter's part of the story, trust me. Keith Thurman says that Errol Spence Jr. never called Al Haymon and said, Al Haymon, just send Keith Thurman the contract. So Keith Thurman never saw a contract sent to him from Al Haymon about a Errol Spence Jr. fight. Really? And he uses this as an example. He says that when he wanted to fight Sean Porter, he called Al Haymon and said, I want to fight with Sean Porter. Sean Porter agreed to that Sean Porter sent, that Al Haymon gave Sean Porter the contract, and Sean Porter signed the contract and they fought. Okay. Now that's the reason, that's his reasoning right there, to make me believe, or you believe, I'm reading it. So I'm thinking he wants me as the listener to believe, believe what I say. Do not believe your lying eyes. Do not believe what you see in the media where he's looking at me in my face saying he wants to fight me, and I'm in your face and I'm looking at him telling him, no, hold on, young buck. Our time will go. Let the fight build. I'm supposed to ignore all of what I saw, because what Keith Thurman says is that Errol Spence never went to Al Haymon, and Al Haymon never gave him the contract. First of all, how does he know that Errol Spence Jr. never talked to Al Haymon and never asked Al Haymon for that fight? What are the likelihood of Errol Spence Jr. never having a conversation with Al Haymon about fighting Keith Thurman? Slim to none, because Errol Spence Jr. was not a champion and Keith Thurman was a champion. But if Keith Thurman tells Al Haymon that he doesn't want the fight, that he's not interested in the fight, why would Al Haymon go through the trouble of hiring either somebody that is in his, either taking the boilerplate form that they have with their contract and completing it with the terms and giving it to him, or giving him a term sheet if it's not a contract, or just full out just putting the whole thing in front of his face? Why would he waste his time doing that when Keith Thurman already told him no? He wouldn't. We already know. If you go try to sell something to somebody, you're trying to get an agreement together with somebody and they tell you no, why would you draft an agreement with terms and then send it to them? All you're doing is wasting your time. All you're doing is wasting your time and annoying them. It's a complete waste of time when they already told you no. You only draft those agreements and send those agreements after when you have a reasonable expectation that you can reach an agreement. But when somebody tells you no, maybe later, not this fight, then you don't do it. You don't go through that unnecessary action. That's not how agreements are reached. They're reached when I talk to you, you tell me what you want, I tell you whether or not I want you ask me what I can do for you, what you can do for me, or you ask to do something for me. I say, yeah, you can do that for me in exchange for this, right? Then we have the conversation. After we have that conversation, say, yeah, we really want to do it. Then you write down the rest of the agreement where you go through terms and conditions that you would not have a conversation about. Things like, a whole bunch of them. So force majeure. You go through confidentiality. You go through, whether or not there's going to be a rematch clause, whether, where the venue is going to be, all of those different type of issues that you do not even discuss until you've come up with this number one thing. Do you want to fight or do you not want to fight? If the answer is no, I do not want to fight, there's no need to go through the rest of that. If you do want to fight, then you go through all of that. So the idea that I'm supposed to believe that because he never got a contract from a written agreement, memorializing what they are agreeing upon, what they have agreed upon, just because they didn't go through that last step, I'm supposed to believe that Errol Spence Jr. never wanted to fight him? That's just ridiculous. You told him no. You told him no right out of the gate. And then the thing with Sean Porter, dude, you were a champion. Sean Porter wasn't a champion. When you said I want to fight Sean Porter, dude, that fight for Sean Porter was for your belt. That was for your belt. That was for your WBA belt. Sean Porter did not have a belt. You had a belt. Who else was Sean Porter going to fight? Keith Thurman was literally in the position of control where he could make the offer. He was the champion. So if you even use the example of Sean Porter, it's like Keith Thurman hangs himself on that, using that example, because he wanted to fight Keith Thurman, Sean Porter, right? So what did Keith Thurman do? Keith Thurman went to Al Haymon and said, get a guy a contract. Send him a contract, yeah. And then Al Haymon sent him a contract. They agreed and had a fight. So if Keith Thurman wanted to fight Errol Spence Jr., what would prevent Keith Thurman from doing the same thing to Errol Spence Jr.? Hey Al, send Errol Spence Jr. the contract. If he admits in this particular article, in this particular interview, because I think it was a Fight Hype, that he did it for Sean Porter because he wanted to fight Sean Porter. Well, he didn't do that for Errol Spence Jr., so I have to assume that you didn't want to fight Errol Spence Jr. because you could have, instead of sending that to Sean Porter, you could have sent that contract to Errol Spence Jr., but you chose not to. Why? Because you are ducking him. And it is obvious to everybody that watched that situation that you were ducking him, that you did not want that fight. Not just because of the fight not happening, but because of words that left your mouth. So it's like, I'm like listening to this and I'm like, man, for real? You want somebody to believe this? Look, man, you're in a situation now where Errol Spence Jr. is the unified champion. You're not. You used to be in a situation where you were the unified champion and Errol Spence was not. I can't recall I don't think he was a unified champion when Errol Spence became the IBF champion. I don't believe. I'd have to go check on that. I think that he got that WBC championship a little bit later. But regardless, there was a point in time where Errol Spence Jr. did not have the leverage to make that fight happen, and Keith Thurman had all the leverage, and Keith Thurman decided not to pull the trigger on that. And Errol Spence Jr. was obviously wanting that fight. Why would Errol Spence Jr. go all the way to the UK to go fight Kell Brook on his home turf instead of fighting Keith Thurman in the United States? The only reason that he went over there, to the IBF and had to fight Kell Brook in the UK is because the other champions, the American welterweights of note, would not fight him. That's why they were referring to him to the boogeyman as the boogeyman at the time. Man, Keith Thurman just full of it. Anyway, you let me know what you think in the comment section. That's just straight comedy to me. Anyway, it is what it is. And with that, I'm out. Peace.